now. All right, cool. Let's just give it a minute while it goes live. All right, cool. Yep, that should be working now. Sweet. Let's just give it a sec. All right, cool. We've got it. Seems to be working. So, Richard, what are you brewing today?
No, we're actually packaging today.
Oh, nice. It's always good fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always fun.
Hey, AB. I'm not sure who AB is, but nice to have you here, AB. It's a okay,
is
cool.
Bev coming in?
There we go. Yeah, nice. Maybe it's a spy from AB and Bev. All right, cool. All right, cool. Yeah, let's get started. So we've got a few people with us. Thanks everyone for joining so early. It's Anshu. It's great to meet you, Anshu Kumar. Pleasure to have you here. Good to have you here as well, Anand. And for the crowd tuning in on Facebook, it's great to have everyone here as well. So I think before we kick off the chat with Richard, I just wanted to give a bit of an introduction to the Asia Brewers Network for those of you who don't know. So basically, we're a resource portal really focused on the brewing news from around Asia Pacific. So really anything from South Korea to New Zealand, from Palestine to Japan. We kind of look at insights and analysis of industry trends and educational opportunities for brewers and beer professionals around the region. And so, you can see that we have a website, a Facebook page, Instagram, LinkedIn. And the idea is that if you follow us, you get updated on the latest industry events and trends. And the story behind Asia Brewers Network, if we're new to you, is we're actually brought to you by the same team who are behind Brew as well, which is one of the region's biggest beer industry conferences and trade fairs. And we also are part of the Brew Asia technical sessions and the Asia Beer Championship, which is actually being judged and is in process right now. Sadly, Brew this year had to get postponed due to obvious reasons. So yeah, but that's just the bit about ABN, the Asia Brewers Network. In terms of ABN Talks and the format we're in today, and the format we're broadcasting on Facebook and talking with for Richard here as well. The idea of these talks is we talk with leaders, people doing really interesting stuff in the beer scene around Asia Pacific, and yeah, and the idea is that this is kind of like a forum, kind of like a relaxed, essentially a bit like a relaxed talk show and interview between members of ABN and people like Richard doing really interesting stuff. So that's kind of the preamble about what we're doing and who we are. So I think today I'm really excited to introduce Richard to everyone. Richard's has been doing some really interesting work in the craft beer space in South Korea, and through he's one of the founders of Playground Brewery, who Time Out in South Korea said was one of the hottest breweries a couple of years back, and they've gotten a lot of good acclaim around the region and even globally through some of the collaboration beers they've done, even with brewers in the United States. And I think it's really exciting as well to hear from someone like Richard, who's been at the forefront of South Korea's brewing scene, because I think that, without going too much into the conversation today and without pre-framing it too much, South Korea has gone really from, in the last couple of decades, from really a pretty low benchmark, to be honest, in terms of craft beer. And then due to some regulatory changes and really dynamic people like Richard and his colleagues, it's really turned South Korea into one of the hot spots and one of the really exciting places in the region for craft beer. So Richard, it's great to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
How's it going? Thanks for having me on the show.
So, and I hear today, you were saying earlier that today you're actually calling us from the brewery itself.
Yeah, I'm packaging right now. We are we're working Saturdays and Sundays just to keep up with our demand.
Well, that's great. That's a good challenge to have if you're that busy. And so you're, I mean, before we start talking about you and introducing yourself, I was kind of curious because Playground, the brewery itself, is in Goyang, right? Which is is it like a 20-minute drive from downtown, from Seoul, like from kind of the central area, or is it a bit further than that?
You could say it's about like 20 minutes from like the end of Seoul. So
right.
From the middle of Seoul, it takes like, depending on traffic, it would be like 30 to 40 minutes. But usually from like the main banking district, it'd be about like 30 minutes. But yeah, it's out there. It's we have nothing literally next to us, so it's just farms and green fields and stuff like that right next to us.
And is that quite an inspiring place to brew in a way? I mean, it's quite like it's a bit of a break from like the mad hustle of Seoul.
Yeah, we like a place. It's actually pretty nice because it's on the north east side, like of actually northwest side of the outskirts of Seoul, and it's a little bit between the DMZ and Seoul. So basically, the DMZ, for people who don't know the DMZ is, it's the border between South Korea and North Korea. And because we are still in a war state, there are no high buildings in that area. So it's actually just really flat. So compared to all the mountains and all the buildings that are in Seoul and Korea, it's actually a pretty flat area where you can see the horizon.
Well, that's super cool, but it's such a bizarre, interesting place to be, being near the DMZ. I mean, that's quite exciting. I must admit, when I was first looking at the map, like when I was first first found out about you guys, because I'd heard that you guys weren't actually in Seoul. When I saw how close you were to the DPRK, I must admit, like I thought I was looking at the wrong map for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite a trip. But I mean, in terms of besides where you are, I mean, because for a lot of people who are joining, they may not have heard of Playground. I mean, they might not have heard about the great beers you guys are making before, particularly people maybe who are less connected, or in parts of Southeast Asia where kind of the word of the South Korean brewing scene hasn't reached. I mean, tell us a bit about yourself. Like, how did I know you came from you didn't come straight from a brewing background, right?
Yes, I've not. I've actually I worked at a big company, and I was an operations manager. My job was basically traveling around the world, resourcing components and looking at factories and all that stuff. So, but I always had some love for the food business. And I always, every time I went on a business trip, I usually went to like the best. I was like a foodie I was a born-in foodie. So, drinking good liquor and beers, wine, and good food, enjoying good food was basically my passion. So I came upon like a time that like I didn't really want to extend what I was doing and try to take a leap into the food business. And so I basically was traveling around actually Thailand. And then I went to a stop called like Tawandang. It's in Bangkok. I don't know if anybody's heard of it, but like it's basically like, it's a brew pub that sells like Pilsner, Weissens, and Dunkels. And it's a very Germanish style brew pub. And it's super huge. They have like night shows. They have like people dancing on floors, and it's just really, really huge. And I was there, and like I had like the time of my life there. It was just one of the best places I've been. It's a little bit like a little bit ghetto, but it was really nice. And I was like, wow, like just good beer and like Asian food just matched so well. So like I decided like I wanted to do something like that. And then on my pursuit of that, I was very lucky to actually meet my partner now in business, and he has family in the States that owns a brewery, and so we got to talk with each other, and then this and that, and in a nutshell, so we started to open a brewery, and I started to learn how to brew at Jolly Pumpkin. So, and that was the start of the whole venture.
And so I remember, I mean, at Jolly Pumpkin, you did something really unique, didn't you? Was it Korean raspberries?
Yeah, Korean raspberries. So usually like blackberries are a bit like a little bit bitter. They don't have that much sweetness in them, but like Korean blackberries are actually very piney and floral, and they have a lot of sweetness in them. So we actually took over like about like 100 pounds to a little bit more than 100 pounds air freight, like on my business trip. So it was basically my luggage, and I brought it over to Jolly Pumpkin. We put that in a folder with one of Ron Jeffries, one of my mentors, beers, and we fermented that for about like 8 months in the folder. And it came out and it sold, I think, within like 1 month or something like that. It was really nice.
And so did you actually, as I saw that was in, and I guess that's a nice lead in because that was in 2015, right? And
yeah.
I'd seen a few different dates when you guys, so Playground, so after you obviously fell in love via Bangkok, and obviously with your passion for food and beverage. So, I mean, tell us a bit about the story behind, you know, moving from there into Playground, because so you guys formally kicked off in 2016, was it?
Yes, that's right.
And so, I mean, what's the story? I mean, why did you guys set up? I mean, obviously there's, you know, you're passionate about food and beer, but I'm curious because Playground's quite a unique name as well. And when I was actually quite curious about the story behind it.
Well, my partner and I both worked at like temporarily worked at like Samsung for a point in time, and we both work at like manufacturing industry, and in that industry and the Korean culture, there's especially at our age right now, like we're both a little bit over 40, and at our age, our era, we didn't really have so if we wanted to enjoy ourselves, like we would actually have to get like permission. Now it'd be like socially odd to actually enjoy yourself sometimes. I mean, just having fun. And you know, even at that time when we were working, if we wanted to take a vacation, we really needed to like, oh, can I please take a vacation? Like, can I use like more than 3 days for a vacation? And it was that kind of era. Now it's totally different, but at that point in time, so we wanted to, so we decided, we came up to each other. I wanted to make a restaurant with craft beer, and my partner wanted to distribute beer. So that was like two things that we wanted differently. And then we decided we wanted to open a brewery. And then, as I told before, that's how we started. And then the name of the Playground Brewery was basically like, we both had children. We have children, and they were very young at that point in time. And in Korea, because it's such a, like Seoul is such a big city, a mega city, there's no real places to enjoy yourself. So the kids always go at the playground. So like every apartment has a small playground, and that's literally the only place where young kids, young like toddlers, can enjoy themselves. So all the pictures that make us happy were actually like pictures coming down a big slide or something like that. And so it all came together, and then we decided like, oh, like we need a playground for adults too. You know, like everybody needs some kind of place to enjoy themselves. So let's do that because we want that really bad. And we all both agreed. And my partner came up with like, hey, let's name the place Playground. I'm like, yeah, nothing more perfect than that. And so we decided that, and we started with the mantra like, don't pause, just play. And it was basically like, don't hesitate on enjoying yourself. So that took us like 3 years into our business, and yeah, that's how Playground was born.
And so what was it like? I mean, because I'm very familiar with Samsung. I've worked in and out of, I previously worked in mainstream advertising agencies, and I frequently worked with Samsung over the last 10 years, right? And I mean, I know Samsung culture is very serious, very demanding, very all-encompassing, even working as someone on the outside of Samsung for Samsung. I mean, were you guys essentially setting the brewery up while you were working there? And if so, like was that quite an intense experience?
So my partner actually didn't need to quit because he was more of the financial managerial kind of role in the part. And I wanted to do something that like I could actually move around, because I was really sick of just sitting on the desk for like 12, 13 hours a day, and it was just really bad. And so we decided our roles and responsibilities in the beginning of our venture. And so basically he kept his job. I originally quit my job when I met him, because I was actually in pursuit of opening something and trying to learn something that I wasn't really into yet. So that's how I got the chance to go to Michigan and learn how to brew, and that was one of the best experiences of my life. Yeah.
What was it like, going from learning to brew in Michigan? I mean, because one of the things I've noticed about the beers that you guys make is you do make a lot of American style beer, right? A lot of the beer, there's some, for instance, I think it was it the Monk, which is kind of like which is like a West Coast style beer, right? I mean, coming back from learning in Michigan and coming back to Korea, was the style of beer that you learned how to make quite distinct from the rest of the market?
When we came into the market, there wasn't actually a very high ABV craft beer around. So, like, for anybody who actually had a high ABV beer before me, I give them kudos and everything. And but like in the market, there wasn't many high ABV beers because of the tax laws at that point in time. Because the more material we were getting taxed on price, not on volume. So basically, the more expensive your beer is in raw material, you get taxed more. So that was really hindering any kind of will to make high ABV beers or really high ingredients beers. But when we came into the market, me and my partner were like, hey, let's not really think about profit, and like let's try to do something that people might enjoy. And we started with really high ABV beers, and that blew off like crazy.
I mean, one comment that I'd seen that I thought was quite interesting about the beers that you were making, and one of the beers that I thought was curious about looking at, for instance, South Korean drinking culture, right? Before we talk about the market more generally, but I mean, I think it was it the Gentleman Lager that I'd been reading about, where you guys were kind of trying to tap into that soju drinking, the kind of the more hard drinking, but also sessionable, right? That kind of because I guess I'm curious to hear more about that.
So that was my first recipe that I actually designed, and so the basic story of the design was like in Korea, when we went out to work, we would always drink somek, which is basically a soju bomb, which is like half a glass of soju and half a glass of beer. And that spikes that beer up to about like 6.8 ABV. I did the math. And so it's at 6.8 ABV, and people will never drink the 4% beer. Like if anybody Korean is listening to this, they probably heard that phrase, is that like, oh, I get too full on beer and it even doesn't make me drunk. So that's why they're adding the soju. And so I'm like, well, I'm doing this business so to fill in needs that customers want. So and it's all about the niche. So I basically wanted to make like a soju bomb beer, and I at that point in time I love like Czech pills with like Satz flavors, and so the beer was designed with like Czech Pilsner character and high ABV. And when it came out, like so I put it up to 7.6 because when I worked, we didn't put half a glass in, we put actually a full glass in, and that's about 7.6 ABV. So and that's how we got there. And I designed it, I made it, and it was really boozy, and people really enjoyed it.
That's super cool. I love the idea of a soju bomb beer. It's super awesome. Are you still producing it?
Yeah, that's our #1 seller.
Wow, nice. Yeah, no, it sounded super cool. I mean, it sounds like the kind of beer I'd love to drink as well. I must admit, I'm partial to the occasional soju bomb.
Oh yeah, we even brought that beer to like Manhattan for like a craft beer gathering thing, and even the newer people were like, "Wow, this is pretty cool." You know, like they enjoyed the alcohol booze in there. And the funny thing about that beer is that like we don't try to hide the alcohol. It's actually, we did have like a time that we like try to make the residual gravity and balance with the alcohol, but I think the people actually liked it better when there was actually an alcohol kick in the end. So it's a beer that will never win awards, but people love it.
Oh, that's great. That's such a cool example of kind of beer innovation, you know, tapping into local market tastes. One of the other things I'd seen as well was that you guys have done some interesting stuff with local ingredients, right? By the way, excuse the barking in the background. My dog. That's my dog. It's not me. It's not me making strange noises.
Okay.
Yeah, he's barking because people are moving house behind me. But yeah, so I'm curious. I know you guys have done some interesting stuff with some local ingredients in a few of your other beers, right?
Yeah, we've done a few things. Like we've used like so actually the first time you were talking about like the collaboration with 2015, that's actually a different one. We did 2 different beers with Jolly Pumpkin, and one was with like Korean roots and like roots that we eat at like a normal meal. It's like vegetables for us, and it had some special like 5 spice berries in them, and that's also very enjoyed in Korea and China. And so we used one of those like ingredients. We also tried to brew. We were the first company to actually brew with Korean-based yeast that was first commercially made, and it was sent out for the Korean Beer Association, Craft Brewing Association, and yeah, we've been doing like these things with local materials, but like I have come to a conclusion for me, because I'm still a learning brewer, is that like getting characteristics of like local ingredients is awesome. I root for all the small breweries and like breweries that are doing it, but I really want to be like master with the best ingredients right now first. So the solid ingredients that don't, because our beers still have so much to grow, and so we want to use ingredients that are solid right now and try to really perfect the beer first. And that's why we like slowly stop using like local ingredients.
I mean, I guess, and that's really interesting. I love that you see a path forward, right, to improve your own beer, because I think that's such an important, you know, that keenness to learn and constantly improve is such an important part about anything to do with beer. I mean, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Heart of Darkness, one of the breweries in Vietnam, which is exporting regionally. John, one of the CEO there, was telling me the other day that he was saying, you know, beer is like a bottomless pit of knowledge. Like you think you've dug you've got to a certain point, and then you actually realize there's so much, there's an endless amount to learn and grow. From your perspective, I mean, where are you guys going? I mean, look, COVID aside, right? Because I think we can talk about that a little later, and I think that's kind of boring anyway. Everyone knows about COVID. We don't have to hash it out. Talking about the vaccines and the economic impact. But, you know, moving forward, I mean, where do you see Playground in the next 2 to 3 years? I mean, what are the areas you do want to improve or scale up in? I mean, is there I'd be curious to hear the areas you guys are working on. Is it export? Is it growing your domestic base? Is it breaking into new customer segments? Where are you guys headed?
So we supply to any place that wants our beers. But basically right now, like we have we've grown very organic. I mean, we're one of the companies in Korea that are like, me and my partner own the company. We run it. We don't have like a third party investment. We are growing very slowly, but healthy. And because of those reasons, we have a very solid philosophy of like focusing on local business first. So like we want to make our customers that are next to us, the people in Goyang City, the people near Goyang City, the Paju area, the Gimpo area, they're all cities right next to us. And the people in Seoul, that we want them to love our beer. We want to make them hysteric and really enjoy our beer. And during the 5 years of business, what we've done is we've made some of them happy. Some of them tried our beers in the early stages. We weren't as good as the best breweries in the States or around the world. So we were always compared to them. But we've grown and we've definitely gamed up a little bit. I mean, we're at that level is that like on a good day, we're getting to places where people will actually enjoy the beers. And so we are getting more and more fans, and we're focusing on that first. And then we believe that if we really focus on those people and they spread the word and enjoy that stuff, then it will go on to places that we wouldn't be able to even anticipate.
I'm really curious because we briefly touched on this at the start, but there's a few more people who have joined since. So you're brewing in Goyang, which you were saying is about, let's say, 30 minutes or so, give or take, maybe worse if it's about traffic from Seoul's kind of in a city, right? You know, you were talking about winning over consumers, winning over drinkers in your local area, and you know, you guys are pretty near the DMZ. I guess you were saying the area is relatively, it's not urbanized, right? It's a relatively, you know, I mean, I know it's a city, you're in a city, but it's a smaller city. How do you even start a conversation with a guy in his 40s in Goyang or one of the other cities or in the province you're in, who's never had craft beer before? Where do you even start with getting them to switch from drinking soju or you know, like hype or one of the classic kind of Korean commercial lagers?
So actually Goyang is a very big city. We're just really on the outskirts where there's nothing out there. So, but the people who came here on the beginning of our opening, and they're like, hey, what's this place? I was like, is this like a coffee factory? And like, no, this is a craft beer factory. And we're like, what's craft beer? Like, oh, craft beer is just like a beer. It's different. We're looking into different styles. And so they're like, give me a pint then. And so, you know, one of the approaches that I realized running this business for five years is that like, I try to approach people with a very disciplined approach which was basically like this is a Pilsner, it uses Czech hops. This is an American IPA, uses like American regional hops. The yeast is like this character, the esters are like this and that. Nobody wanted to listen to this kind of stuff. It was either it's a little bit bitter, it's really strong, it's a little bit, there's a lot of carbonation in this beer, and or this is refreshing. Those were the 4 words that survived during the 5 years. So people would just come in and was like, what's this beer? Oh, it's really smooth, you can drink it. And then they'll enjoy it smooth. Yeah. So the next time they came, can you give me that smooth one that you gave me before? And then like, why don't you try this bitter one too? I'm like, okay. And now he has two favorites, like a smooth one and a bitter one. So it's an IPA and this Belgian blonde. And after a while, they actually get to know the names of those beers, and then they actually know the styles of the beers. So I think it took me about like the customers that always come here every week. I think that at least took them about like a year to actually really know the genre of the beers. So yeah, that's how I approach it. Like we have farmers that come over with like farmer hats. They're like 70 years old. They're like, give me that strong one, you know, like give me 2 pints of that. Like they just chug it down like, good to go to sleep now. They just leave after like 10 minutes. Yeah. They bring their tractor over as like tractor and stop in. And they're like,
really?
Yeah.
They bring the tractor?
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, that's such an unusual experience. So many craft beer people are so urban centric, right?
Yeah. So like, and we've noticed this because like other breweries that's the small nano breweries that started in Seoul have a total different experience with us. So they have really young, like trendy, hipster customers that are really into the beers. Like they know what they're drinking. They've drank like so many beers that are around the world, like, and they have this great knowledge, probably more wider than me sometimes. And they'll be like, oh, I've drank this from, I've gone to Denmark, I've been to like Colorado and like all these places. But like our customers are basically like really rural people just living around us, and they're very loyal and they support us a lot. So and out of the 5 years, we've been one of the companies that survived during the COVID-19, and we have a very strong backbone with our locals. So I gotta say, I mean, we really appreciate those like beer avid lovers, but local customers are also that important.
Well, it is interesting because one of the challenges we constantly hear, and one thing like when I'm talking to brewers around the region, is so many brewers now, because of COVID, have had to completely re-gear often toward their local communities if they weren't already servicing them anyway. So it sounds like you guys are a little bit ahead of a lot of other people. One thing that I found really interesting, and I'd actually noticed a while ago about your beer, and one of the things that has always stood out to me about Playground is the really distinctive packaging design. So I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly, but it's like hahe tal, the traditional Korean masks.
Nice one. Yeah, nice one. Yeah.
Okay, nice. Yeah, how do you pronounce it again? Accurately?
하회 tal.
하회 tal. And see that's. And your cans like look super distinctive. I mean, with the mask, there's traditional masks on them. I mean, can you tell us a bit about why you're using such an iconic symbol of Korean culture on your cans? I mean, and the story behind how you guys made that decision to do such cool branding.
So basically, like when I traveled a lot, and whenever I traveled, like, the presents that we brought around were like small packages of kimchi or some seaweed or those masks. If you come to Incheon Airport, you're gonna see those masks. Any place that you have Korean tourists, you're gonna see those masks. So when we came into the market, there weren't a lot of craft brewery companies in here. So I have all respect to the first second generations of craft beer companies in Korea. But they all slowly decreased at the end because they were making pilsners and Weissens and Dunkels, and the law was really bad, and the whole craft business was deteriorating. And so when we came in, we really wanted, like, we had like a small mission to we wanted to make the best craft beer in Korea, and that was like, I think every single brewery that came into the market at that point in time had that mission. And so we decided like to make it as Korean as possible. But at that point of time, when I came in, we were actually one of the few breweries that had a Korean head brewer. And and like everybody like hires someone from the States, someone from like Germany or places all over Europe and places like that. And so we really wanted to focus on us being a Korean local company and what would be good. And so we decided those masks were cool. And then I decided that I wanted to make a persona for each mask and design backgrounded on their characters in the whole play of what that Howe mask was. And it was really cool because the Howe mask actually has like a really important meaning to it in Korean culture. It was the only play. It was like, it's basically like stand-up comedy, and you could mock like really higher people at that point in time. And it was the only play that you could actually mock like the higher society. And the higher society at that point in time actually allowed it, and they were really smart to do that because they made the people vent through that play, and it was a very good communication system. And at that point in time, we thought communication was so important too, between generations and gaps between economical differences and stuff like that. And so that came into all in part, and we just like, oh, that's it, we're gonna use that, and everything is history after that.
I mean, it sounds a lot like Hahui kind of has the same similar culture in like Western, I guess in Western medieval culture, court jesters, right? And I noticed one of your cans is a clown. I actually shared the link to just a row of the cans, the lineup of the core range in the Zoom chat. For those of you on Facebook, if you just type in Playground Brewery cans, you'll see it pop up in Google Images. So, would you say, I mean, going back to your ethos as well, that you guys have a bit of an anti-establishment streak? I mean, you're doing things very differently, very distinctively to a lot of other brewers in South Korea, right? You're not in Seoul. You're brewing in a slightly unusual area compared to a lot of others. You've got these really unique can designs. You're much more Korean. I mean, would you say that's how you guys are quite distinctive to the rest of the market? Or even in terms of styles right now? I mean, like what are you seeing in terms of style trends? Are you like in the Korean beer market today?
So these days, I gotta say, like when I came into the beer market, there weren't a lot of good beers, and I think that I've improved my beers as much as I can during the 5 years that I can. At a rate that I think is pretty distinctive. But the thing is, all these new breweries make so good beers. I mean, like all these new breweries are making so many good styles, and who's doing who would you say is doing a really good job right now in Korea, like just generally around South Korea? It's really tough, because I don't get to drink all of their beers, but like all these beers coming out of the market from each brewery are like really sublime. And I'd have to say like our friends that open similarly with us, like Amazing Brewing Company, they're doing well. There's a place called Art Monster that's doing well.
They're very well regarded, right?
Yeah, Caligari, that they're shooting out good beers. Gorilla in Busan is pushing out good beers. Like all these places, like I can't like Kabru, like one of the first breweries. They were really old, but they renovated, and like they're pushing out really good beers. Like all the anybody that I haven't said might be offended, but like I really think all these beers are so good. And even the small brew pubs in Seoul right now are making so interesting beers that like I wish I could taste because they're really good. And but like sometimes I can't get to that. But it's just amazing how much quality improved has happened in Seoul area right now.
I mean, it's funny because and I remember at the time that I think a lot of commentary online about South Korean beer, and I'm sure it's annoying for anyone in South Korea to hear, but there was that quite famous Economist article, right, like about a decade ago, where the Economist writer said that he thought the DPRK was making better beer than South Korea, and there was that there's that North Korean brew pub in Pyongyang, I think, that was making
Yeah.
beer. And it seems like it's been such a shift since then, right? Like the quality of what you're saying, the quality of beer locally has improved. I mean, what's been the main driver of that? Has it been the regulatory changes? Because there have been some quite significant regulatory changes, right, in the past 2 decades?
Yeah, there's so one of the things that like the Korean Craft Brewing Association, which we are part of, we are directors of, and we really are proud of establishing, is that like this has been pushed by the second generation of craft breweries to a level where it was almost at near the threshold, and we have like the final push to actually make it through. And all these new breweries coming out too. So all these companies that were happening also helped too. And I think changing the laws from tax to being taxed from material to being taxed to like volume really helped, because like now there were no barriers. It's just like you can make whatever you want. You can make a 20% ABV beer. You can make a sessionable beer. You can put like all these fruits in the beers, and like so people had no limits with their imagination and the creativity that the brewers in Korea have been showing. I've been stimulated a lot by like my peers, and I think that's also what makes us grow. The peers are doing so well, and we try to keep up with them.
What about the consumer side? I mean, obviously the production side from what you're saying, and I think a lot of people would agree, right? And it's really fascinating to hear, how positive you are about your competitors, because that's not always the case in some places. So it's really cool to hear that optimism and how it's rising on the production side and the brewing side. What about on the with consumers? I mean, are you seeing as well like a big shift? And you were talking about these hipsters in Seoul and Gangnam, and I'm sure they've always been there, right? They've always been, these globally exposed hipsters. But in terms of like, the average man in the street in Seoul or in a second tier, in a mid-level sized city, are people like, is the ordinary drinker widening their appetite beyond soju and traditional kind of commercial lagers? Are you starting to see that changing? I mean, besides obviously the farmers who are pulling their tractors up supporting you, I mean, which is such an amazing little anecdote. But more generally, are you seeing that change?
So it's still only been 5 years. When I opened the brewery, like I looked at the American market, I looked at other markets too, and I looked at the food market. And for palate to actually change and evolve to enjoy other flavors that aren't like really easy, it takes about 7 to 10 years. And we've noticed that like no matter how hard we work, it doesn't really change the speed of that. So I think by numbers, craft beer has been growing double every 2 years. So it's about like 50% increase every year.
Wow,
so every
that's
years,
nuts.
So it's a full 100% of growing in sales wise. And I think this year we might have a little bit more, because craft beer has been gone into like convenience stores, which is really abundant in Korea. And the access to craft beers have been much more easier now. And I think we're getting to that point where maybe next year or the next year after, well, when people would actually go to a place and say, hey, do you have any craft beer here? We're not actually at that point yet. Like craft beer lovers, are gonna still, look for the craft beers when they go outside. But I think it's a very slow increase curve, that happens every year, and we don't really want to rush it. Like I don't think you can actually rush it. I mean, if somebody can, that person is gonna make a lot of money, and be super successful. But I think like it takes time for the mass to really enjoy getting through that phase.
I mean, you aren't just a beverage guy, right? You've also, I know you've done food before, and obviously you're very passionate about food and beverage. I mean, have you tried using food pairing with craft beer, with Korean cuisine? Have you tried short-circuiting that?
So I don't know, like, because we've been focused on our beer, but like we are really well known for what we've done with food in our craft in our brewery. So we like I have many people who can agree with this. It's really hard to say it with my own mouth, but like people think that our food is the best brew pub in
Nice.
yeah, like not just Korea, like a lot of places. And so what we did when we started was that my chef was like he came from like a fine dining background, and we really punched into like Asian flavor character foods. We started with Thai food, with like Japanese flavors, Chinese food, Korean flavors, and all that stuff. And we put them into like food that we thought would really match our beers, and it changed our market. I mean, like I can say this without a doubt, is that we were the first brewery to actually have good food in Korea. And when our business blew off, everybody came over. They looked what we were doing. They saw our queue. We had a queue for 2.5 hours, and everybody wanted to taste our food. We were on national television as being the most delicious, like like place to go, and everybody started to focus on food. So like when you come to Korea and like go to a nice brew pub, they're gonna have good food now. Like the game has just gotten up. Like so now we might not be the best, but the thing is that we made that mark in the market, and I know a lot of people, like my fellow brewers, like the whole people around Goyang, really appreciate it.
I mean, in terms of, I mean, that's such a cool story. And I mean, for me as well, I mean, I massively appreciate having, you need great food with great beer, right? I think having one or the other you don't get the full experience with the beer as well. On the food pairing side, because now you're in convenience stores. What about, what kind of uptake have you seen besides, because convenience is obviously critical for, getting into that those at home consumption moments, someone coming home from work and getting a few beers to drink with dinner. What about other channels? I mean, are you guys, because I remember in one of the earlier conversations, you were saying that in South Korea, the online ordering is actually quite not super popular right now. I thought that was really weird, because my experience, and I've been to South Korea, and I mean, it's a very, Seoul, for instance, is a very tech savvy place. Everyone's got nice phones, companies like Naver are world leading in terms of Korean technology. Yet I was blown away that there's not that major sales channel through e-commerce. Why is that?
So everything else you can order like within a day. Like if you order at like 10 p.m., it's gonna be at your door at 7 a.m. in Korea. That's how much Korea's e-commerce has grown, and we really wanted to be a part of that, as in craft beers do. But the current reason is regulations. Regulations all exist in every country, and one of the regulations is that like if you actually deliver alcohol, there's a good chance that a minor might be able to open it, and that's number one. And number two is that alcohol is distributed by certified alcohol distributors, and these people aren't ready to change to e-commerce yet. So we have those two major reasons that we don't do it yet, and there's also a party in the government that really doesn't want us to sell online, because it will ruin the future of children and everything, like etc. Like, yeah.
Do you see that changing anytime soon, or it sounds like there's a pretty intense lobby to keep it kind of offline only?
I think like mentally, I think we can change it. Like we've changed a lot of laws during the 5 years, but it's like, I think it's like washing your hands with a bar of soap. Like you have to really take your time to dissolve that bar of soap. It's not gonna just go out like, and we really hope it changes. But as knowing that one of the ecosystem, like the alcohol distributors are a big part of our ecosystem in craft brewery, and they really need to make the change too. So I think it'll be first that these distributors or someone makes a disruption in the market, and there's like a very high tech savvy alcohol distributor, and that guy I think will be like the first step to change it. And then once people start getting more orders and like want more convenience getting like their selection of craft beers, because I know a lot of people, they love our craft beers, they like love like this and this, but they also love other companies this and this, and they want like a selection of all the beers that they like. And so a New England IPA lover will like have one of our hop splashes, like one of Amazing's First Loves, one of like Gorilla's New England IPAs. Like they want the whole batch, like Craft Bros, like Life IPA, and they want like 5 of those, and they want like a full box of it, and they can't go to like all these places at once and get like one box at a time. So I think eventually the customers, if the customer grows and if there's some disruption in the distribution area, maybe, yeah.
If anyone's listening, Richard's just given everyone a huge commercial opportunity, and someone needs someone whoever's a retail distributor invest in craft beer delivery in Korea.
That's so true.
It's a free opportunity for anyone who needs a new project now that they're with COVID. Opportunities are still out there in the beverage industry. You've just got to know. You've just got to listen to ABN Talks, and you'll find out all these great opportunities. So Richard, I was keen to also to kind of the last few minutes, and in case anyone has any questions as well, please feel free to drop a question in on Zoom or on Facebook. I know there's a few more people watching on Facebook Live, and we've actually got some comments. Reza Rossley said was saying how much he loved the can designs, and Tung Win from Daymay Brewing in Saigon was saying that his tap room, Daymay Brewing, is missing food. So I think you're inspiring other tap rooms to up their food game, Richard, from what you were saying.
Yeah.
But one question I had about where the South Korean scene is going, right? And I think where the Korean brewing scene is going. I mean, I guess to me it's like a two-part question or two-part topic, right? I mean, right now I know Korea's been pretty good at pretty disciplined as far as from what I've seen with COVID. I mean, it's not, obviously, I know there's been outbreaks and there's been a few different waves and there's been issues and all that kind of thing. In the next few months, I know you haven't got a crystal ball and we're not epidemiologists, but where do you think the scene is going to go in the medium term, like in the next 6 months? Because if there's no online delivery, where are brewers, if there are further lockdowns or more restrictions, how are people like you guys going to sell more beer? Is it through local restaurants? Is it through supermarkets? Is it through convenience stores? And I guess are consumer habits changing? Like, are people looking for more higher ABV options, lower ABV options? Where's the market going, do you think, in the next 6 months?
I gotta say, like this won't really. I don't think this will represent a lot of countries. I think this is specifically for South Korea. South Korea is doing pretty well of like handling the economy right now. So we've had some like lockdown-ish kind of things, curfew kind of things happen when there are like surges in COVID, like infections, and like basically, but the whole economy is still rolling around. I mean, it's not stopped at some places. I mean, everything has shrunk, but it's still rotating. I mean, at a very slow pace. So, I think this is gonna last quite a while. This isn't like until a vaccine comes out. It's gonna be here, and I don't think that's going to be happening in the next 18 months. So until like a lot of people get vaccinated, if they do actually come out with a vaccine. So we're thinking this is going to be a long-term kind of thing. And we've noticed that people don't go out as much, but they still want to have fun. I mean, like, you can't restrict someone from having fun. And there's also like a threshold of how much Netflix you can actually watch. So it's fun when you're binge watching Netflix, but it's not fun when you're watching Netflix every day, like for 12 hours. Like,
it gets very boring. I can assure you.
Yeah, it does get boring, and so people want to meet each other. They want to go outside and they want to enjoy themselves. And I think the market is growing to like what Korea has actually grown into now is that a lot of breweries right now, even when they're cash short, they're focusing on packaging. So packaging, we've been really lucky because we were one of the first companies to actually can. Actually, I think we're the first company to can craft beer. Yeah.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
I mean, was that immediately, or did you start that slowly after launching?
No. We started with cans. We grew with cans. We started with crowlers,
Right.
And we actually got a phone call from Ball Company. It's like, "Are you reselling our cans?" Because we were selling out so many crowlers. I mean, like, yeah, it was like, it was crazy at that point in time. And so we sold a lot, and then we came to the point that we're not making more crowlers with, like, we're getting a canning machine. So we got a canning machine pretty early, and there were some people canned their beers, and I think it was the first ones to actually distribute them to the market. So so we were real lucky because we had that packaging systems. And a lot of the companies that do packaging have been surviving this era. Even small brew pubs that have like a small bottling system, they would, people would just come by, walk through, and like drive through and get like a full case of beer. So it's definitely going into that drive-through era. So where you drive through and you get a pack of whatever you want, and you can get your food delivered by e-commerce. So I think people make the effort to come out, and we've noticed that like our takeout sales have grown a lot, but like our in-house sales that people just enjoy at our place has definitely dropped down. And so since we are a distributing company that distributes to many restaurants in Seoul area and all over Korea, that sales has dropped a lot, and that's probably the same with all the other breweries in Korea that I know. And I think if you don't package, you're not going to have that chance to really increase your sales or actually have that opportunity to spread your product to people that really want your product, because a lot of people aren't going to stay at a restaurant as they used to.
How about convenience store sales? I mean, I know it's relatively, you guys are relatively, you were saying it's relatively recently have gotten into them, right?
Yeah, we just started, and we also started because of those reasons, because
right.
Like the first tiers of like the bigger companies right now, with bigger investments and capital, like companies called Jeju Beer, Kabru, which one of the first companies of craft beer in Korea. They do convenience stores, and they've been growing. I mean, their sales have dropped with like keg sales and like local like sales have dropped, but the convenience sales have just like skyrocketed. So I think that's also the future, but it's so cheap. The price, there's like a frame in Korea. It's like 4 cans for like $10, and it sucks because that frame has been around for so long, and they're selling ABN Bev beers at that price. But when you have a craft beer that you want to taste really good, like you can't fit into that category. It's like, so all the craft beers that are in the convenience stores are, even including ours, are a little bit watery down. I mean, like we are known for like putting a lot of ingredients into our beers, like a lot of hops, a lot of malt, like just overdosing. And we can't do that. Like it's we won't be sustainable. So one of the movements that are trying a company called Amazing is trying to do is they're trying to have people smart order so they can break that frame. So you can have like say 2 cans for $10, but those 2 cans are going to be very high quality, like New England IPAs or like an Imperial Stout or something like that, like something different. But the convenience store customer base isn't that like craft beer lover. It's just your average Adam and Jane, like, and they don't even know what craft beer is yet. So like I said in the beginning, like I still think there's about 2 or 3 years for that palate to grow.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, on winning over that convenience store customer, winning over the broader base, like what we were talking about before, the average guy on the street or lady in the street in Seoul. I'd seen that you guys had created a bunch of ads about a year ago, right? There was like a small advertising campaign you ran, and it was kind of showing people cracking open a beer at home, a few different people. What kind of tactics and strategy are you guys using? I mean, besides distribution, not talking about sales and distribution, but from a marketing strategy perspective, I mean, what have you guys found that works? I mean, did that campaign work? Or have you had to try other tactics? I mean, what works from a marketing perspective in South Korea in the beer market?
I gotta say, that's really tough. I mean, like marketing, we tried a lot of stuff. Like our previous marketing manager, she did a great job when she was here. But the thing is, it doesn't really engage. Like what we try to do is like, I know a lot of companies are doing the same thing. It's like trying to make that TPO, like time, place, occasion, where you enjoy craft beer. And like, it's just right next to you, like we try to make people enjoy craft beer whenever you have or having a good time and all that stuff. And we try to market it that way and try to make people know that like, drinking like a slightly better tasting beer is actually going to improve your happiness that day if it's really available and you're enjoying it. But it's I gotta say, it doesn't really get to people. Like we wouldn't have like, oh, after that day, like we have a great engagement sale. The best thing that what we notice is that if you come on national television, that works. Like people will be like, oh, craft beer, it's on television. I gotta try craft beer. So everybody comes to drink craft beer. So I think the more it comes out on national television instead of like small niche market places, like stuff like that. But we've noticed whenever there's like something comes on, when we come out on television, like national television, like our sales just go up like that. But those are very like small surges. They're very short-term surges. They don't last. So I think this marketing is just right now, like I gotta tell you, like for me, I think I have put like my endurance to like 8 years. It's like 8 years. I'm just gonna stick to what I'm doing right now. I'm gonna keep communicating. I'm not gonna really care if people listen to it or not, but like I'm gonna say the same message over and over. 8 years, some days, 3 years left, and someday around that 8-year term, I think people will want to listen then. Like, oh, I'm actually into craft beer. Like, oh, there's this company that's been here for like 8 years. Like, oh, he's got a lot to say. I want to hear what he wants to say about beer. I want to hear what they think I should do, when I should drink. And I think when they want to listen, when the customer actually does want to listen, I think it will be more powerful then.
Yeah, I mean, marketing craft beer is very challenging, right? Because obviously, if you're a smaller business as well, you think of those huge budgets that the AB InBevs and the Heinekens and the big domestic commercial brewers have to kind of pump out. Back to what you were saying about TV, right? It's super easy to get on TV if you're Heineken, or pay your way through it. But I mean, I was quite impressed with your guys' digital setup. I mean, I saw there was a lot of commentary on Naver about you guys, and I mean, it seems like there's like a loyal fan base of beer fans and reviews on Naver. For those of you who are listening who aren't familiar, Naver is kind of equivalent of like almost like Yahoo or Google in South Korea. It's kind of like a huge kind of tech giant that has, you know, a blogging platform, a search engine. You can do like an app and maps. You can do all sorts with it. We actually have a question, by the way, on a slightly different subject, but one that's I still think is actually a really interesting question from Anshu, who's actually on our Zoom chat. By the way, if anyone's on anyone on our Facebook chat as well, welcome to ask any questions. He was just asking about. He was saying it's very informative in what you've been sharing, Richard, and the market potential. But what he was asking actually was what the brewing job market's like. And, you know, I think it's an interesting question because, I mean, you know, you were mentioning before that I think you were saying you were one of the first Korean brewers at the time, and there were a lot of foreigners working in the brewing space. I mean, are there since you started, you know, and obviously you guys took a very local strategy route in terms of branding and positioning, where you look at base, which I think is really smart. But I mean, you know, are there opportunities for foreigners to work in the Korean brewing scene now, or would you say with COVID and with the direction the market's going, it's become much more of a local, you know, it's much more favorable toward Koreans?
I'd have to say there are still a lot of like new brewers that come from abroad. I mean, like one of the brewers at Moon Bear Brewing Company. He's Brazilian and he does a great job of what he does. One of the best breweries out here, like down in Daejeon City, there's a Ranch Brewing. He's a French guy. You know, like there's a lot of foreigners here. I mean, like Busan, like the Gorilla Brewing, like a lot of them are foreigners, and they're coming in, and they're like some people are just, you know, assistant brewers, and I think they just choose to make beer in Korea rather than, you know, like other places else. I mean, because you know, Korea is a nice place to live, and I think they just choose to do that, and it's a very fast changing place. So yeah, and the beers over here has been improving like super fast, and I think there's a lot of opportunities. Like, but you do have to do like a 2-week, you know, quarantine when you come into Korea. But the thing is, if you get a job here, like it, you know, you're basically searching for a job in places over here. But it's a tough job, and I think a lot of people, you should actually try to like work at a brewery before, like at locally or somewhere before you come here, because like brewing, I think, is a very glorified job that it's a very physically tough job. It's very enduring, and it's a lot of fun too, because you know, you get to drink your product at the end of the day. And but you know, it's a plumber kind of like I don't know, like janitor plus / artist plus cook plus, you know, it's all that stuff.
Yeah, no, that's one thing that I think a lot of people who aren't in the beer scene don't realize is that brewing is not brewing, and let alone anything to do with beer, right? From beer sales to brewing is not exactly glamorous. It might seem like we're selling these overpriced beverages, but actually there's actually a tremendous amount of work hard work and hard labor, right? Going into them. Yeah. So Richard, I mean, one thing, I mean, you know, I think that's it in terms of questions, and I think, you know, in terms of nearly it for today. I wanted to end on a, you know, I was curious actually back to your own beers. You know, well, one thing I like asking, you know, and I'm trying to ask on the future ABN Talks is, of the beers that you've made, what's the one that you're most proud of, and why were you most proud of it? Now, I don't necessarily mean arrogantly proud, and I know you're a very humble guy, but I mean like something that you created that you really thought was interesting in on your own right, that may not have been the most popular beer you created, but it's a beer that, you know, you can really passionately talk about and get really excited thinking about.
What are you talking about? I'm proud of all my beers. No. So like I think like the 3 major beers that like really get to me is the first one, of course, because like it's our bestseller, the Gentleman Lager, and it is very localized, and yeah, it pays our rent. It's really important for us. And number two, I think, would be Hop Splash IPA, which also won the gold award for at the Sea Brew for New England IPAs. It was the first New England IPA made in Korea. First one that's been selling in cans for quite a while. We've made a lot of mistakes during that time, but we made it work. And we made it work. And after that, like right now, I think South Korea is actually like one of the best places you can have New England IPAs. There's the whole market is into New England IPAs. I'd actually have to call it like South Korean IPAs now, like sometimes, like because there's a lot of it.
It's its own style. I mean, is it evolving to a local style?
Yeah, I mean, like it's evolved a lot. I mean, like the water in Korea is very, very clear, so it has very little mineral in it, and it actually really is good to make New England IPAs with that water, and so. I'm very happy that, and we changed like some law. Like I actually was in charge of changing like one of the hop laws, because like hops were actually like getting caught in like preservation like laws from the FDA in Korea, and we tweaked that, and that's why I actually made that beer, is because like we made it possible to import hops, and so I put everything that I had into my fermenter, and yeah, that was a big story of that one. And recently, one of my favorite beers is right now is my Mistress Sour Ale, which is basically my vacation beer. So I made it on my vacation. I designed the beer when I was on my vacation to Hawaii. And there's a juice called there's actually a drink, Mai Tai, the Mai Tai.
Sure, the cocktail, right? Yeah.
And they have POG Mai Tai in Hawaii, which is basically passion fruit, orange, and guava. And so I love that drink. I was holding like a pint of that everywhere I went. Like it was just literally like, oh, this is my favorite drink now. And so I wanted to design that as a beer so people would have that same kind of refreshing feeling. So it's a kettle sour, and it has passion fruits, and it has blood oranges, and it has guava in it. So it's like a PGB sour, which is Playground Brewery, initial for, and it's a very funny beer because I wanted to make it really refreshing. And when you do a kettle sour, because of like the lactobacillus that's in the beer that dies when you actually boil the beer, gives out like a sharp flavor, and I really didn't like that flavor that's in the end. So and the sharpness also wasn't like as smooth as I wanted to. So actually, I was looking around at a lot of yeast, and then I picked a sake yeast because that's a very, the sake is such a like thick, rounded flavor. And so like, hey, I'm going to go bold with this one. So then I fermented that with a sake yeast, and it actually really matched the sharpness of the beer. So when you drink that beer, it actually doesn't taste like it's aggressive. And it's slowly growing, and I know a lot of people that really love that beer. It's a very small niche that people actually enjoy that beer, but it's one of my favorite beers right now. Like I wish I could make it more.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a lovely answer. You're making me extremely thirsty talking about all this stuff. I've got POGs popping around in my head and dreaming about getting your beer. You've got to FedEx me a case down to Saigon one of these days once COVID's over, or else I can come and visit you up in Goyang to come and try all this, drink a beer with all the farmers and their tractors next to me. Oh, Richard, look, it's been wonderful having you on the show. It's been really, really interesting. I think we've actually had a pretty good turnout across Facebook, on Facebook Live as well. So thanks everyone for tuning in on Zoom and Facebook Live. It's really been it's been a pleasure having everyone tune in. But look, Richard, thanks again, and really appreciate your time. I know you're having a busy day doing your packaging, so I'll let you get back to it. I know it's very important. You guys are doing very well. So otherwise, thanks again for taking the time out today to join ABN Talks. And look, Richard, I wish you the best of luck.
Yeah, you too.
So I hope that the next few months do well in the convenience store sales, and you guys keep on working on your beers. And I think many of our listeners are going to be very excited to try one of those gentleman lagers sometime soon. The next time they drop by Korea. Yeah,
hopefully very soon. Hopefully COVID gets out of our ways very soon, so we can travel.
Touch wood. We're all hoping that right now.
Cheers.
All right, thank you so much, Richard. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next ABN Talks. Thank you again, and have a great weekend ahead wherever you're listening in. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.